Hi everybody, this is Greg Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Greg, who is an intermediate photographer from Montana. Metadata Canon 30D, 58 millimeters, and the exposure trio is ISO 400 f4.5 and 1/60th of a second. And Greg's backstory, paraphrasing here, he says his photo was taken from his hotel room in Buenos Aires. He said he was attracted to the image of the laundry hanging in an orderly manner among the apparent chaos of all the buildings sort of stacked up here in the city. That part of the image is the main subject of the image. And he says he also really liked the late afternoon light and the geometric patterns of all the rectangles, squares layered in the shot. Under questions, Greg says, question I have is regarding the red doorway. I'm assuming he is talking about this subject right here. Is it too much? Should I have cropped it out? Really enjoying almost all of the things that Greg described in his backstory. I love the juxtaposition of this, which looks very lived in, starts to really tell a story, really fires my imagination. Love that juxtaposed with the geometry that he describes. Really beautiful colors, really beautiful pattern of rectangles and squares. And I'm also enjoying the light that he mentioned. Even though it's soft and it's subtle, there's still a sense of not only dimension. The thing about light is that it drives emotion as well. And so seeing a touch of light coming in, yes, it drives the feeling of form, difference between dark and light, creates a feeling of being able to move through, but this warm light also gives us an emotional feeling, and that is very powerful. A lot of things to enjoy about the image. So much of the time, to me, these kind of pattern shots of architecture where they're flattened out really give us a lot of crops to consider. So many different potential stopping and starting points. And in some ways, the way Greg has shot this, he is abstracting this scene to a certain extent. And I just mean by that we are starting to, in a lot of areas of the image, pay more attention to the intrinsic ideas here, geometries, shapes, and colors versus the concept of things like building or window or doorway. And that it is really cool how this more literal feeling of, the clothes on the line and the window dressing and all of those things, much more literal. It's neat how it kind of comes out of that feeling of the more intrinsic ideas. Really enjoying the image a lot. For me, going straight to Greg's question about the door, fascinating thing for me is it's not so much the door that I want to crop in this image, it's the lower part of the image. And here is why. In the back part of the image, it is very flat, and it is abstract to a certain extent, and it is about just shapes and colors, and then this breaks that up. This front part of the image expresses quite a bit of a feeling of depth, of space, and it creates this other reality for me that competes with the power of this to be different than all of the other things. And to my mind's eye, my starting point, if I was going to look at cropping this image, would actually be to crop it into more of a panorama. I would lose all that stuff at the bottom, and I'd look at something like this. That would be my starting point for the crop. So let's just go before and after. So there's before, and there is after. Another reason that I want to crop that lower part off is that the red back in here is so powerful in the context of all of these high value sort of pastel washed out feelings of broken color, lower value color. But it can't be nearly as powerful as it could be having to compete with this that's a lot more close and palpable. But from my mind's eye looking at this in terms of the story, I don't really know what this is. It looks like maybe somebody painted this wall red, but it doesn't really connect to story so much as it's just a mystery, but it's actually one that's taking me away from something that I think is more compelling. So those are the reasons for the crop up from the bottom. Once I crop this up from the bottom, then I start to consider some other crops. One of the things that I think about is coming in a little bit more from the right and actually cutting that doorway, either cutting down on it like that or cutting down on it to the point where we only see part of it. And part of my thinking about that is to not finish the doorway, to suggest it, so that there is another layer of information that can move me through the image a little bit without competing with this full on. I mean, I think that you could do something that was real symmetrical in terms of the top corners kind of being pinned out and the same, and you could come all the way over to here. At that point, this color right here starts to take on quite a bit of visual weight, and with the door there sitting next to it, not so much, and those things can kind of play off of each other, give me one more space to maybe go into in the image without creating this feeling of depth of space. I still get a sense of the geometry and the flat and then the lived-in space. I think this is probably the crop that I would choose for this image. From here, I can imagine, if I just copy my background here real quick, this is a Photoshop video today, but just copy the background for good workflow, and then I could imagine potentially playing around with curves like this. I'm going to go to this middle eyedropper that will let me set a gray point. This looks like it wants to be gray, so this could be a great place to click and clean up any color cast. So if I go and do that in the image, it takes out quite a bit of that warmth of the sunlight. And then here's what I can do. I can come back in now and paint with black on that mask. I'm going to start at an opacity of about 20% and paint the warmth back in on the places where it looks like the light is hitting the most, and potentially maybe control where the eye is going even more. So warm up the feeling of the light coming in and hitting this outside area with the clothes on the line, and in here, and maybe even the door a little bit. In other words, I can maybe use this layer to emphasize movement towards my main subject a little bit more in the image, and we might be able to even push that even further. One of the things that I was fascinated by is when I did crop up from the bottom, I started to, as the viewer of the image, go more into these spaces. I feel like there's a ladder that's kind of hidden away in here that I see. I feel like I'm seeing the shoulder of a person that's up here. I feel like with the bottom cropped away, I start to move in to more of those spaces, and I feel like that I need this information in the corner to keep it from being just a single one-note idea, but this is enough to keep it layered without giving a feeling of near to far depth that takes away from the juxtaposition of the abstract geometry with this lived-in part of the image full of a lot more literal story. Would love to hear your feedback about the image today and the video. It's a really beautiful, stunning image to start off with. I want to say a big thank you to Greg for sharing this image with us. I want to say a big thank you to you for being here. Hope to see you again real soon. Not on the Daily Critique in the digital darkroom there, that's better, on the Daily Critique. Thanks a lot, everybody.